We're going to talk about people, and funny enough, I'm going to introduce the topic of people by talking for a second about technology, because today I'm going to talk a lot about technology. And it is true that you will not succeed unless you have the best ADS system. You won't succeed unless you build a social and digital strategy. I'm going to drive that home later today. You will hear me speak very strongly on that point. But don't get confused. It is still the case in recruitment, right, ladies and gentlemen, that the people with the best people will win. The people with the best people will win. Technology is not going to cover up the fact that you haven't got good enough consultants. Because the actual differentiator isn't going to be so much the technology, because it is my view that those top 10% companies who are going to thrive will all have the best technology, because they're going to have the resources to buy it. The real battle is to have the people who can deliver the outcomes from that technology. Talent is still the competitive advantage. And so we're going to cover 4 things today. First of all, I'm going to talk about hiring, because that's the beginning of driving this profit machine that we're trying to create, the sustainable business. We've got to hire the right people. We've got to retain them. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about high performance, and I might get Chris's help on this. I have said these words myself. Every recruitment owner I speak to says the same thing. They're frustrated with recruiters who are mediocre, they're not performing, they're not good enough, they don't seem to have the energy and the desire, etc., etc. But please, let's turn the spotlight on ourselves, because plodders thrive where plodders are allowed to thrive. It is our responsibility to hire the right people, train them, motivate them, and either get them to a level of high performance or not. Because if you don't, you cannot drive a profitable business. You know that 70% of your gross profit is soaked up in consultant salaries. That's our biggest cost. That's the leverage point. And then we're going to talk about coaching. It's become clear to me over the years that this is the massive industry blind spot. We're not very good at training, that's for sure. We're even worse at coaching. Coaching is mentoring on the spot. It's developing people during the day. It's growing people. It's something we're just not very good at in this business. And so I'm going to speak about that at some length. And then the final thing we'll talk about under the 4 pillars of people is performance management. Because, the biggest destroyer of profit in your business is long-term serial mediocrity. It's underperformance on an ongoing basis. And so let's just remind ourselves, the people with the best people will win, rather. The recruiter is still by far our biggest cost. It's still the consultant that absorbs our management time in terms of training and development and stress and sleepless nights. Whoever had a sleepless night about a competitor? I've never even given it a second thought, but you certainly do think about the people performance and the issues in your business. Hiring people has never been harder. Hiring good recruiters has never been harder. I hear it every day. There isn't a single client of mine who isn't trying to hire people. There isn't a single rec to rec, and there's probably some in this room who hasn't got 450 orders for exactly the same type of recruiter. And we'll talk about how we're going to deal with that. Staff turnover in our industry remains catastrophically high. It is a massive blind spot for us. We accept 50% staff turnover, and we say that's the recruitment industry. That is not the recruitment industry. Well, it is the recruitment industry, but it doesn't have to be. The RIB report tells us it's 50%. The cost, the disruption, the harm to your brand. We've got to get better at that. And so the recruiter is still your key differentiator. Your profit will still hinge on the success of your recruiter. And I've said about technology, and you do need the best technology, you do need the best social media, but it will never cover up the fact that you've got crappy recruiters. And you might take some offense at me saying you've got crappy recruiters. You might say, well, that's not true, Greg. Actually, we have some very, very good people, and they work very, very hard, and I bet that is true. But what I want to share with you is that even if you do have highly skilled recruiters, many of them, sadly, are working on the wrong things. This is what's just so evident to me, but I think when you're in the business, it's hard to see. And you might say, well, what are the wrong things? Well, I go into recruitment companies and I see people spending hours writing ads to place on job boards, then to attract thousands and thousands of inappropriate candidates. And then you've got recruiters, highly skilled, highly paid, earning $100,000, sitting there screening out plumbers from Mumbai and sending them emails saying, no, I can't place you in this UX designer's job. spending hours and hours on the wrong things. You've got your recruiters making more and more cold calls, speaking to more and more voicemails, and that's not giving them any success. So what do? We then say, you must do more of those. And so we actually have an industry which is competing with each other to see who can prospects off the most. I'm not saying we shouldn't sell and we shouldn't do calls, but warm calls are going to be a hell of a lot better than cold calls. We've got recruiters spending hours writing flowery summaries of their candidates, which I can tell you none of your clients ever read. So we've got very skilled, highly paid people working on the wrong things, and we're not developing their skills in the areas. So when I say crappy recruiters, that's unfair. I used it for effect. They're not bad people. They're not even bad at recruitment. They're just working on the wrong things. Your leverage point is still the people that you hire and retain.